Hey there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is an off-the-cuff Red Pill Religion podcast on our new, actually old, but our what has now been rechristened streaming channel, Max DNA Group. I am Max. Part of the Max DNA group is part of the overall Red Pill Religion project, I guess. The Red Pill Religion channel, by the way, any of you looking for it, if you subscribe to the Red Pill Religion channel, you should notice the channel we're on now is the Max DNA group, where it's going to stay. And this is still a group account where a lot of people are on. If you would, down in the low bar, please find our new Red Pill Religion channel. We've only just started it. We're at only 137 subscribers. Help us make it to 500. See if you can just help us make it to 200. Send this around to your friends, the new channel. There's linked in the low bar. We'll have it on the redpillreligion.com website. Just to remind people, if we ever disappear off of YouTube, find us on redpillreligion.com, where if you like our content, which is quite unique, I think, please do hit the PayPal or Bitcoin tip jar. Hit us up on Subscribestar, or because we are on Subscribestar, we are available now. Please subscribe for $1 a month. You can make a huge difference for us. $2, $3, $4, $5 would all be very helpful to helping us buy new equipment, increase our visibility, increase production, and so on. So we could use your help on any of those. Also find us on Gab and Facebook and Minds and all the usual places. This is an impromptu live stream. I've got my Red Pill Religion co-founder, Jean-Baptiste, with me. Say hi, Jean-Baptiste.
Hello, everybody.
Jean-Baptiste is an Eastern Orthodox Christian, but a very, very good friend and an insightful one. So we're doing a response video here to Ted Shoebat. We're going to try and make it. We're doing it off the cuff. We're just going to answer him. Ted Shoebat, of Shoebat.org. He's probably, well, I don't know. He's pretty known more on his own name now, but I'm going to call him Waleed Shoebat's son anyway. And he has done a video where he did call us out here at Red Pill Religion, and that's fine. We're not angry or anything. Oh, I'm going to beat you up. You bet. Not whatever. He called us out. He was annoyed with us. And it's this video on the David Wolf channel called Michael Voris, older men with 16-year-old boys is permitted. A ridiculous quotation out of context. And this is where we're going to go ahead and take Ted to task, both on his scripture reading and I think his overall attitude. Mind you, Ted, I'm going to tell you I'm a real serious Catholic, and I'm going to be talking to you explicitly in those terms, or as a serious Christian overall. And he mentioned us, and he said, "Oh, this crazy." I wasn't upset, but he said something like, "Those crazy Red Pill Religion. Oh, they're making the." Okay, so here's the response. Ted, get a grip. I do encourage anybody who thinks I'm overreacting to please go, and maybe you'll agree with some of what he says and disagree, but go see Michael Voris, older men with 16-year-old boys is permitted. And I'm going to say up front, I beyond this issue, because he talks about way more issues than gay issues, as moderns like to put it, or LGBT issues, as moderns like to put it. He does talk about that, and he's really hard on the gays. There's just no question that he is. His favorite phrase is citizens of Sodom, and then sodomy and all that. And then, by the way, I don't fault him for that language. It just hurts modern ears to hear it. But he takes to task Michael Voris. And frankly, Ted, I think you've lost your mind on Michael Voris. You have more of a point on Milo than you do on Michael Voris. Seriously. But Michael Voris of Church Militant, the most active, even condemned by people in the Vatican, against the homosexualization of the church, to use the phrase, the homo heresy. I mean, the guy who has built an apostolate over 10 years, going after heavily going after pro-gay, LGBT, and misbehaving priests, all the way up to the Vatican, been condemned. Michael Voris has done other things too, like fought Satanists directly, including following around Satanists who were driving around with blasphemous statues and following them around with the statue of Saint Michael. You can call all this crazy, because I find that Ted does like to call people crazy a lot. But Michael Voris has been public for years that he was a gay guy. I don't, God, I hate modern language. He lived a gay lifestyle for years, and more than a decade ago, he repented and quit completely. You know, and this has been known for years. I suppose we could accuse him of secretly still having gay trysts, but I don't think he's doing that. And literally, Ted, I've heard Ted rant about Americans and Canadians about how you can't trust them because they always want to bring the gays in, which, by the way, he's not entirely wrong about, but he needs to look at it in more detail. A few things in this response video that Ted Wolf did on his David Wolf channel, there were a few things that bothered me. First off, I have to just start off with, I know, David, that you or Ted, that you kind of have problems with the Jewish religion and not being able to just be honest about what we see coming out of Jewish people. I'm going to say, though, that I mean it when I say that I have serious Orthodox Jewish friends. I used to seriously struggle with faith, and I will reveal to you that Orthodox Jews did really help me see that there was a rational reason to believe there was a God, because I, for the life of me, really didn't believe there was a God and didn't see why anybody did. And patient and very intelligent Orthodox Jewish friends, some of whom I'm still friends with on Facebook and such, really helped me. And some secretly on the slide said they really respected Catholicism, actually, secretly, that they didn't want anybody else to know that. And I've had a background where I came up out of a really horrible, messed up environment. And then came up with some Protestantism and then some New Age crap and then just atheism for decades. I became a Catholic because I believe the Catholic Church can legitimately say that it is the church Jesus Christ was founded upon. But that was a long journey for me. And one of the things I gotta say, dude, is what is the point of going on about him being Jewish and doing the stereotypical Jew thing when you're talking about Milo? Don't do that. Really? I get it. It's fun to make fun of the stereotypical way some Jews talk. Milo's grandmother was Jewish. He's like a quarter Jewish at best. He holds on to that heritage a little ethnically, but he was raised Catholic and he still is Catholic. By the way, don't you dare say he's not Catholic just because he's a sinner. But anyway, really, Ted, you've gotten over the top with making fun of the Jews. This isn't a Jewish issue. I'm sorry, but it's just not. Unless you're so eugenicist, and I know you're against eugenicists, you think bringing up his 25% genetic heritage of some Jewness in there wipes away his years of Catholicism.
Well, I would like to mention that he only started using the Jew. The Jewish, he's more Greek than Jewish, but he used the Jewish Greek Catholic phrase to primarily trigger the alt-right, who are, you know, identitarians, just different. That's all I want to say about that.
Yeah, we don't have to go too into it, but dude, pull it back a bit, okay? I got Jewish friends who can take a joke. I can take a joke. Come on, really. Enough of that. Don't be like the eugenicists. Moving on to something more substantive. Ted has often been quoted as saying that Sodomites are worthy of death. And he has full scriptural justification for saying those words out loud, but I think he's got a real problem with reading the scriptures properly. Now, don't get me wrong, Ted. Neither one of us is going to sit here and say to you, this is not a sin and it is not a problem. It is. But I'm going to point out a few things to you that I want you to think about. First, I'm going to talk about the Bible. Then I'm going to talk about the realities of the cultural milieu of the Americans, the Canadians, certain Europeans that you have mentioned in other videos, that it's crazy. You can't trust these crazy Americans and such because they always want to bring the gays in. And I will say there's some truth to that, although what we do here is different than what you're talking about. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But first, let me tell you, as a convert to Catholicism, who grew up in what you would call the culture of Sodom, actually the fact that the church was trying to be nice to gay people and at least bring them, bring them more toward the truth without being nasty to them was a plus for me when I was coming in. And I had those progressive roots culturally and politically growing up after I abandoned my atheism. And it took me a long time to become Catholic. All right, Ted? I wasn't born to it like you, I think. And I wasn't sure. It took me a long time to come to believe things. And the fact that I was joining the Vatican II church that was saying, all right, we can't say all the Protestants are going to hell. We can't declare who's going to hell, actually. We do need to realize that people fall into these weird categories and their struggles and stuff. And frankly, I grew up totally believing the thing that Milo talks about in this interview. We were told in the 80s, and that's when I kind of came of age, really more in the 70s, early 80s, but still, we were told scientifically and otherwise that, well, all these traditions, we have to reevaluate our ancient traditions because of all this science showing that, being born with a different sexual orientation is genetic. And so we have to maybe think about these religious sensibilities and whether they're really nice. And I grew up believing that. I mean, totally believing it with no good reason not to believe it that I could find, especially because the gays that I knew, I was one of those weakling kids that you probably wouldn't like, didn't like bullies, hung out with the theater kids, hung out with the nerds, playing their Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. That was me in the 80s. And, the gay kids were always really basically abused at home and had no friends and sometimes got the shit kicked out of them at school or in the neighborhood, and I would befriend them. The truth of the matter is I never became quote unquote gay. As I've mentioned, I also ran into pedophiles and others, and I don't want to actually relive that or give you my resume to just how caught up I was in with sexual deviancy as a teenager. But I had left home by the age of 15, had been a frequent runaway before then, fell in with bad people multiple times, teachers and others. I was lost, brother. All right. Now, let's go. And so I was steeped in this culture that Milo is talking about. But I want to go first to this whole these people deserve death thing. Because as a scriptural matter, Ted, I think you need to be reading your Bible more clearly. Or maybe you're going to disagree with me, but in which case I hope you will respectfully come to me and tell me what you think I've read wrong here or the context I've got wrong. Let's talk about Romans 1, which does toward the end there say that these people are worthy of death. Okay? Now let's go ahead and let's mention a couple of things about the Bible. I've got links to this that I will include, but in reality, what I can tell you, Ted, and I'll make sure and give you references if you don't believe me, chapter numbers were not added to the New Testament until roughly 1,000 years. I'll get you the references if you need them, but chapter numbers were not even added to the New Testament until roughly 1,000 years ago by a Catholic bishop, by the way, but whatever, not an infallible bishop by any means. Nobody would say he was. He decided for convenience, let's bust this into chapters and themes or whatever. And then verse numbers were not even added until a few hundred years after that. I'll get you direct sources if you doubt me. Otherwise, just take my word. The bottom line is the chapters and the verse numbers are handy, but as many traditional Catholics actually, and quite a few others have complained that this has also led to the practice of hyper-focusing on verses and chapter numbers as if they have some kind of canonical status. When really these are just letters these men wrote, that Paul and others wrote. So I'm going to give you a read of Romans 1 toward the end there, to the end of Romans 1 and continue on to Romans 2. I've removed the chapters and the verse numbers. You tell me what you think I've got out of context here, because he's talking about people indulging in unhealthy sexual activities. So I'm going to move in, and I'm not going to give you the chapter and verses, just numbers, but you can go find this in Romans 1 and 2. By the way, out of a Catholic Bible. Also, Ted, I'm not being snotty. I'm being serious. As a Catholic, stop using that King James Bible, please. Catholic Bibles are available online. And the King James is messed up. Okay, the New King James is better, though. I'll give you that. In any case, here we go. I'm going to read. These are Paul words coming out of the Catholic Bible with the verse numbers and the chapter numbers removed. And it's going on. Because they exchanged God's truth for a lie and have worshipped and served the creature instead of the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. That is why God abandoned them to degrading passions. why their women have exchanged natural intercourse for unnatural practices, and the men in a similar fashion too give up normal relations with women, are consumed with passion for each other, men doing shameful things with men and receiving in themselves due reward for their perversion. By the way, to stop there, I believe the due rewards starts with the diseases and stuff that usually go along with that kind of sexual activity. But anyway, in other words, since they would not consent to acknowledge God, God abandoned them to their unacceptable thoughts and indecent behavior. And so now they are steeped in all sorts of injustice, rottenness, greed, and malice, full of envy, murder, wrangling, treachery, and spite, libelers, slanderers, enemies of God, rude, arrogant, and boastful, enterprising in evil, rebellious to parents, without brains, honor, love, or pity. They are well aware of God's ordinance. Those who behave like this deserve to die. Yet they not only do it, but even applaud others who do the same. So no matter who you are, if you pass judgment, you have no excuse. It is yourself that you condemn when you judge others, since you behave in the same way as those you are condemning. We are well aware that people who behave like that are justly condemned by God. But you, when you judge those who behave like this while you are doing the same yourself, do you think you will escape God's condemnation? Now, Ted, you can go, anybody who's listening can go read and see, yes, that runs right over a chapter break. But again, I mentioned to you, Paul didn't put any chapter breaks in. Others did later, and those are not canonical. They're just kind of a tradition. And there have been Bibles published in the centuries since these were added that removed them or changed them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think the read I just gave you shows why it is inappropriate for people to go to the end of Romans 1 and just stop there and think that they've figured out what they're talking about. Because I think it's very clear in context that what Paul is really saying is that when you're condemning others, remember, if you're a sinner too, you're a problem. I don't remember where it was that St. Peter said, watch out for reading Paul, because he says things in ways that are easy to misunderstand. Do you remember where he said that, John Baptiste?
I actually do not.
I'll find it.
I think it might be
on Peter, I think. Huh?
I would have guessed it was in Acts, because there's some parts of Acts where the other apostles kind of told Peter that he was going a little bit off. There's a couple things where Peter got overzealous of I think. I'm not sure. I haven't read Acts.
I have it right. It's definitely in one of Peter's letters, and warns that Paul is difficult to understand. Anybody who and easily misunderstood. St. Peter specifically warns that St. Paul is easily misunderstood. I will find the verse for anybody who doesn't believe me later. It is really easy to misunderstand Paul, and I've actually, having struggled with Paul many times, I remember reading that from Peter and saying, oh, I feel better now, because Paul, and the way I usually take Paul is that he is actually dripping with sarcasm and salt and irony. Because, and you can check me on this too, and anybody who wants to tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. There was no concept of homosexuality in the Bible. There's no even distinction between sex with children and sex with adults that I can find in the Bible. Not because the Bible approves of these things, but basically, if you're having sex outside of normal heterosexual marital intercourse, it's all fornication, and to some extent, it's all sodomy. Now, the literal definition of sodomy just says anal and oral sex, although that's in modern terms, right? I think a fair read of the ancients is that they considered any kind of sexual deviance to be part of sodomy. Certainly, if you have anal or oral sex with your wife, you are a sodomite. If you, and I would argue very strongly that if you masturbate to porn, especially if it's any kind of all porn that's involving weird stuff, you're also a citizen of Sodom and a sodomite. And I'm not accusing Ted of anything by any means, but I've noticed that an awful lot of Christians privately admit, especially Christian men, admit to me that they have a problem in this area. And, I counsel them because I admit it. As a 21st century American male, I was taught from an early age that masturbation was healthy and normal and to be encouraged, and that you might get sick, you might get cancer if you didn't do it, and it was healthy and you should do it. And I believed that for the longest time, which means that when I decided I was going to stop doing that, it was not really easy. and it didn't happen overnight. It really didn't. Because even if I got rid of the porn, the habit didn't go away. I know that sounds gross, but you know what? It's what the confession booth is for. And by the way, I make use of it regularly. I go at least twice a month with my son. That's not a brag, by the way. It's a recommendation. Your life will get better if you take frequent use of confession. Even if you haven't committed any mortal sins, go anyway. So go ahead, John Baptiste.
Well, that's also, at least from my perspective of what salvation is. You have to continuously ask for forgiveness. That's kind of what Paul is saying in this part of Romans, because it's like you are all doing the same things. You're all sinning, including my. And you know, he would point to himself too. Paul wasn't, you know, as you know, he was a human being, like all other human beings. Yeah, he
and a sinner.
Yeah, and a sinner. He didn't try to actually put himself above all others. He believed that was, you know, only Jesus could do that. So he did keep humble throughout his history, but he was, you know, definitely referencing we all sin all the time. You know, our you know, later in Romans or earlier in Romans, I think it's later, all of our, you know, all of our piety, all of our goodness doesn't matter because we are, you know, our righteousness is but rags to God.
Yes.
So there's nothing we can actually do except for ask for forgiveness and forgive those around us, because, you know, when we judge people, we're taking, you know, the job of God essentially. And you know, to be a moral arbiter, and we don't have the first understanding of morality, really.
Right. And now, in Ted's favor, he has talked about, and I've seen this myself, the professional speaker circuit, where you're in among the you know, the establishment here in the United States, Canada especially. You're in with the establishment, therefore you're acceptable to the establishment. Your ability to even get in and speak is highly compromised. You almost always become some kind of whore doing it. I've seen that with my own eyes. Ted has talked about this. It's true. But when you get, I forget the point I was going to make. Oh, and there are what you might call, I've seen atheist entryists come in and say, well, I'm a conservative, but I'm just an atheist. I've seen LGBT come in and say, I'm a total conservative, but I'm going to be gay, and I'm gay. Will you accept me? And while some of that is entryism, I got to tell you at this point, Ted, I'm 53 years old. I don't know how old you are. I'm going to guess 50. I'm going to guess you're 30 plus or minus 5. And that's a total guess. Correct me if I'm wrong. Plus, I know from your background, you probably didn't grow up entirely like where I did in middle America. Where especially during the 70s and then progressively through the 80s and through the 90s, the entire country was fed this line. And Milo has got you know, it's you know, gays are harmless. They're a tiny minority who just has you know, we don't want to call it a birth defect because that would be mean, but you know, they can't help that they're differently oriented and whatnot. And this was sold to a whole generation of people. Milo, who, you know, I am old enough to be his dad. He's probably 30 plus or minus 5. I can't remember off the top of my head. Have met him, but as a fan, not as a kind of a. Never mind. We aren't buddies or anything. Although I'm probably going to send this to him, see if I can get an answer out of him. In his book Diabolical, How Pope Francis has betrayed clerical abuse victims like me and why he has to go. He talks about a lot of it. Now, some people, like maybe Ted, are never going to accept that Milo got seduced into the culture of Sodom. But I believe an entire generation of people got seduced into this culture. And I don't know, a real literal read of the Bible would say we should have all known better the whole time. But I'm here to tell you, brother, I didn't think like I did. It really made sense to me at the time. Totally rational sense. And I don't think I was in denial. And this is common. And I can tell you that while I'm older, I was a sex abuse victim, Ted, and I got in with pedos when I was very young. I won't give you graphic details because it's none of your business, but none of it was priests. It mostly involved seculars, anti-Christians, and people in like the Chicago public school system, the Chicago PD, and the Chicago Transit Authority. Because, of course, where do pedos go? Where they can find kids. In reality, by the way, Ted, and it is important, as a Catholic, you should be aware of this. All Catholics should start pointing out that as horrifying and inexcusable as the priestly sex abuse scandal is, it is still the case that most of this happened in the 80s and 90s, and most of it happened to teen boys, like Milo. I wasn't one of them because it was seculars who got me. But we should all be pointing out that it's still a minority of priests, that most of it came from back then. And these children, a whole generation of children, I mean, literally, I'm old enough to say I could be this guy. I could have held Milo as a baby. A whole, starting from, I would argue, the boomers onward, when bisexuality became a thing in the 70s, a popular trend in the 70s. We were all seduced into it. Everybody under the age of 50, at least, were seduced into this. And I actually believe that Milo is correct about some things. Let's look at this. Let's look at another child being sexually abused. Let's look at the 11-year-old trailblazing kid, drag kid, Desmond. You must have seen this, right? And the way that his parents are supporting it, and other adults around him are all clapping for little Desmond, the trailblazing drag kid here. Now, I suppose if you're taking a real old school view of how sin works, then when little Desmond here turns 7, the so-called age of reason or accountability by old Catholic tradition, as soon as Desmond here turned 7, he should have looked at his parents and said, "God wouldn't want me doing any of this, you perverts." But I doubt that's a reasonable expectation of little Desmond here, or the way the scriptures say, you know, everybody knows this is bad. You know, BS, when you are this deep, when you are a kid who's barely pubescent or even prepubescent, and everybody around you is talking about this like it's normal. I'm sorry, I don't believe Christians who really literally think that these kids should know better. That's just not reasonable. And Milo was caught right around the age of puberty, right around the same age as I was. I think his experiences were more profound in some ways than mine, but less in others. I remember when I heard Milo making those jokes on that radio show, whatever that interview was a few years ago, and it's clear that Milo has changed since then even. But he was still basically in that phase of denial and holding on to the Christian identity, but thinking he could also hang on to the gay culture. Because the gay culture that Milo was part of was actually fun to be around at one time. It really was. You know, they put on, they kept their dirty business in the closet for them, you know, in quiet, or in the gay bars or whatever, and would come out to respectable society and not be in your face and not be demanding things. And there was a funness to it. I just admit it. It was fun. When I heard Michael Voris laughing about these jokes, I thought the same thing. He's someone who came out of the gay lifestyle himself, and it's hard not to go back to the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, and be making those old gay jokes that we all thought it was kind of normal and just kind of funny. And there really was and is still a gay subculture that says, listen, we know we're perverts, but as long as we keep it quiet and leave respectable people to do the respectable things, we'll do our dirty business in silence, which is kind of what Milo seems to be advocating now. Now, for a number of reasons, I still don't think that works from a Christian perspective. You just can't be approving of, yes, do your, I mean, in any normal time, we would be looking at somebody like Milo and saying, what are you talking about? You know, if he came out with this in the 70s or something, all this, it'd be a different story. But literally, you can't say the things Milo does and not get destroyed, except that he's out as one of these professing gays. And he makes a lot of really good points. I don't think he's actually realistic or being entirely honest with himself if he thinks that really he can never go back to, oh, I'll be a 54-year-old queen. I'll be a 55-year-old queen who, you know, hangs out quietly in certain back lounges that, you know, only us sophisticated men get into, where we can do our dirty business. That is a gay subculture he's been a part of, and he may think that he can keep that going. I don't know. I mean, when I think of Milo, let's say he never gives up his gay lifestyle. Let's say he just never does. I think of Oscar Wilde. Look up Oscar Wilde sometime. And one of the things you'll find is that on his deathbed, Oscar Wilde converted and asked to see a priest and died a Catholic in his very last days. And that is the sort of fate I pray for Milo. I want to make a couple of other points, but did you want to add anything more, John Baptiste? Because I'm going to add another point or two and then close it up.
All right. Well, with Milo Yiannopoulos, the whole reason why I think he's really attached to this gay label, because it allows him to do the things he does. If he wasn't gay and he was just a straight man, half the things that he does, nobody would have listened to him. That's the sad truth of it. And I think that with what he said in that interview, which the David Wood Wolf video only showed, a 2 to 3 minute segment out of a 17-minute segment, the whole 17-minute segment where they were talking about it. And it's the whole video is going on this shaky ground. But Milo said, this is something that I'm working with God. This is between me and God, and I'm working on it, type of thing. So I'm thinking that he might go more to how the traditional gay Catholic would supposed to do, which would be to go the MGTOW route and not do any type of relationships or have a life of celibacy.
In fact, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Which was is a traditional practice that has been encouraged by Catholics, by Eastern Orthodox, and by most Christianity for most of its history.
Yes, in fact, I can tell you that if you now, of course, just being gay married is all kinds of its weird problems. Although he says he considers it a partnership, there's a long-standing Catholic tradition going a really long way. If somebody's struggling in sin like this, you keep coming to church, you keep going to confession, you keep working on the issue you have, and you keep trying to get better. David may be under the impression, I know some of his followers were giving me grossly out of context quotations from the catechism and stuff saying everybody has the capacity to meet the standards of the church, and they do, but nobody has the capacity to do it perfectly unless you're about to call yourself a saint. And I mean, really, go to Sensus Fidelium. I'll even give you stuff from Father Ripperger, who is his old school hardcore exorcist, get over the fact that most people are going to hell kind of Catholic, okay? And even he's like, how do you overcome habitual sin? This is how you do it. And it's all the process of going in regular, making use of the sacraments, doing confession, trying to change. I can tell you, too, that a lot of what Milo is saying is accurate in as much that giving up an addiction, and I do believe in addiction, is really hard, and almost nobody can do it overnight. Having worked with alcoholics, been one, alcoholics, drug addicts, sex addicts. I would also even mention something, I've mentioned this before, and then I'm going to close up with a couple more remarks. If you go on YouTube, look for something called NoFap, NoFap. Kind of, gross, but go ahead and look up videos on it. And this is guys who mostly aren't even religious, who are young men who were raised to think that masturbation and all kinds of kinky sex and porn and all that was good, healthy, and normal, who on their own, for even completely non-religious reasons, discovered that their health got better if they stopped walking to porn. And not only their health got better, their voices got deeper, they got more confident, they were more confident women, they had more energy, they got more done. In other words, just stopping this sin made them healthier. From the medical data alone. And every single one of them reports how hard it was. Like they did really well, and then a week later they relapsed, or 2 weeks later, or a few days later, or they'll go 6 months and then they relapse and they feel like total failures. You know what? But most of them eventually, succeed, or it happens that they fall only once in a great while, and they're doing it for purely personal reasons. Somebody can do, but it takes them years to get to it because these kids have been taught since they were preteens to do this. They need help, they need mercy, and I really view Milo as one who's trying. and doing and saying and doing the right things. In the end, it's not on us to say. Maybe he'll be like Oscar Wilde and get it all out on his deathbed confession. Maybe sooner than that. We're all sinners, Ted, and that's one of the things I would say to you and your fans who were bashing on me last night. I'm not blaming you for that, but I mean, it wasn't just your fans; it was some others, I think. You know, I'm not going to say let he who is without sin cast the first stone, because that gets taken out of context a lot. Although I think if you read Romans 1 and 2, you will find, honestly, without hyper-focusing on the verse numbering, you know, like that's some kind of numerology, Paul is talking about all manner of sin and how you're all sick and disgusting. You know, when you judge others, you better be clean yourself. And he didn't just mean clean of butt sex. He meant clean of all those things he said, the disrespectfulness, the deceitfulness, the lying, the corruption, all of it. I mean, literally, if you're a fan of Ted Shoebat and you give in to porn once in a while, or you've ever had oral sex with your wife, you're a sodomite, son. Get used to it. Now, the difference is, what I would say is that the difference is that, you know, this is a denizen of sodomite who's asking for help to get out and is trying to make things better. Why don't you start by appreciating it that way? I don't think he's trying to sneak it in. And Michael Voris, with his work over the last 10 years, the idea that Michael Voris is trying to sneak sodomy into the church, dude, come back to earth. You need to at least try to understand the American concept, the American cultural milieu, and the way we've all been indoctrinated ever since the boob tube came out, and what middle American culture has been taught is normal. It's almost like we've been taught to think backwards. And that was one of the most insightful things that Milo said. Like, this starts with a lie they told us in the 80s, which, by the way, was when he was a baby and I was teenager in my 20s, late teens, early 20s. We got sold a lie. And a lot of people are waking up and figuring it out. And they're going to need help, and they're going to need mercy for this. And I think I had more to say, but I'm just going to end with this. First off, Ted, you're welcome to come back on anytime and we'll argue this out. Or I'll come on your channel. I don't want to snipe because I think we're more on the same side way than we're not. But I got to say one other thing. I've got problems with you there, Ted. You were mocking people who were saying they would pray for Milo. Dude, I want you to do yourself a favor right now. I want you to get out your rosary and pray one for Milo Yiannopoulos. If you're any kind of decent Christian, you should go pray a rosary now for that man. And you should go pray and add Pope Francis to it and add Michael Voris to it and anybody else who's Catholic who you are upset with. It's good for you. And by the way, this isn't a brag, but I say the Our Father at least 20 times a day. No, at least 26 times a day on a really bad day, since I do several things, including on a typical day, 20 decades of rosary. I'm looking into becoming a Dominican, by the way. A lay Dominican. So yeah, stop, please, Ted. Never, ever, 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 please, again, make fun of somebody you say to pray for Milo or to pray for anybody else. Really, think of the most evil man in the world. He needs your prayers the most. Please don't do that while you're talking about being a good Catholic to others. Just saying, brother, because I actually do respect you and your content. I'll mention one other thing. We do have gays who hang out on our servers. You know what they are? They're not on the public speaking circuit. They are kids, mostly in their teens and 20s. And we don't give them a hard time, because what will happen to people like you, Ted, if they hear people like you, Ted, they run. And they think that Catholics are evil and wicked and horrible. I treat them like human beings. I'm nice to them. I joke with them. I invite them to come on. I show them that we don't hate them. When they're willing and receptive to hear it, I'll say things like the masturbation and the porn is not good for you. I'll say things, have you noticed that gay relationships are inherently unstable? Have you noticed the disease that passes through them? Have you noticed? And we have real conversations. And if you've even talked to psychotherapists who have illegally, because it is illegal in the United States or Canada to try to do anything to make a gay person be in any way not gay, psychotherapists who do it anyway underground to try to help people will tell you most gay guys are lost teenage boys without fathers, without families, with crushing poor self-image and a host of psychological maladies. They'll say they can be helped, but that the law won't let them. So what I would say in the end then Ted, is I want you to consider when talking to Americans and Canadians, especially ones you know are not part of that glitterati class that Milo crests into now and then, have some pity, have some Christian charity. And remember what I think is maybe the most important part of the Our Father prayer, which is forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Please remember, every time you say that, you are asking God to forgive you to the exact extent that you forgive others. And if you will not forgive others their trespasses, God will not be forgiving yours, which, by the way, is echoed pretty well in Romans 1 and 2, I think, if you read it properly. Okay, please come on, Ted, if you want to, or just give me another response video, whatever you want to do, brother. I think you haven't thought this through. I really haven't, and I think you overreacted to this. Literally, you're off the charts nuts if you think Michael Voris is trying to sneak sodomy into the church. You've lost a grip there. Just because he's nice to Milo? No, he should be nice to Milo. So should you. And you should pray for him. All right, that's what I think, everybody. God bless. Hey, in about a half hour or so, or an hour or so, you're going to be doing the Week in Atheist Stupid stream here on the channel?
Yeah, about in an hour at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be talking about the Kathy Pence. What's going on with Karen Pence? I'm sorry, not Kathy, but Karen Pence.
Mike Pence is relative.
Which everybody's going to get to hear my rant about homosexuality and Christianity, regarding that, because those are the groups that are going against them. And we're also going to be talking about this nun group that the Ninth Circuit Court has forced, that deals with elderly people. Specifically, they want them to give contraceptives and birth control to these elderly poor people that they serve.
All right. Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about that.
Look forward in the next couple of hours. We'll have that on our stream. Please give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. More important, please go subscribe to the new Red Pill Religion channel, which is going to be dedicated to less off the cuff and more formal interviews and stuff, and is growing. Help us get it up to 500 if you could. Just see if you can get us up to 200. All right, everybody. God bless, and Ave Maria.